Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the marketing and distribution panel. They told me when they asked me like 5 minutes ago if I would moderate this that there would be, Pol EV giving us questions. So I've been hoodwinked, but here we are. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have these gentlemen introduce themselves and tell you just a brief bit on their background, what they do, and then we're going to take some questions from y'all in the audience and I'll help moderate the conversation a little bit. So Doug, starting with you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Doug Weiss, and I work in marketing and distribution. I've done it for quite a while now, so currently I work for an agency called Infinity Concepts, full-service agency, and also I have a resource website that I've started on marketing and distribution for films called Faith Film Fests, so faithfilmfest.com.
So I'm João Carlos Dias, but you can call me John. I know it's a strange name, and that is the reason why I don't speak a perfect English, because I'm not American or Brit or something. I'm from Portugal, which is a very small country on Europe, okay? Not Brazil. Brazil is a big country on South America. Portugal is a very small country in Europe. And I work for a television channel, the first non-Catholic Christian channel in Portugal, which is called Kuriakos TV. Fun fact, Kuriakos means the one that belongs to God in Greek. So it's like a subtle way to remind everyone that the channel it's belonging to God. And yeah, I worked in marketing for a long time, and now I do distribution on the perspective of television, and that's more or less me. And you have like my bio on the how do you call it, the paper, the newspaper from the festival?
On the program?
Program,
Yep.
On the program.
Bio on the program.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Larry Frenzel. I am a hybrid. I'm an attorney and a producer, and I also do a lot of writing. I've been working with the Kendrick brothers since their very first feature that was given a theatrical release. I've made all their distribution deals with Sony Pictures, and I have other clients as well, and so I've done all kinds of different distribution agreements and so forth. So I'm an attorney and also a producing type person. As a film school grad from UCLA, I spent time in the secular industry before getting involved in the Christian industry.
Okay, so I'm going to take questions from y'all in just a second, but I want to ask you guys a question to start this off, which is, if I'm thinking about doing a film project, when is the correct time in the process to be thinking about marketing and distribution?
Right at the beginning. The first thing I ask anybody who brings me a script to read as a prospective project and so forth is, who's your audience? Who's going to go see the movie? And how are you going to market it? And that's one thing. One interesting sidelight of that is with Facing the Giants. If you guys have seen that movie or are familiar with it, going back to the very beginning, when I saw 3 scenes on a laptop, it was exactly what I was looking for at the time, because I felt there was a need for that in the marketplace, but we had absolutely nothing to market it with. There were no known actors, there was no underlying property, there was no true story. And so my thinking on that was, what about contemporary Christian music? That's one way to market it, because it was very popular at the time. And that ended up being the entree to us getting a theatrical release through Sony Pictures, because we went to Provident Music and wanted to see if we could get some of the top names in Christian music at the time to license songs to us. And Provident said, oh, we don't license unless we see the movie. So I told Stephen Kendrick, send him a disc of the movie and let's see what happens. And halfway through watching the movie, the chief executive at Provident called Jim McBride at the church and said, we're really interested in what you've got. And Jim said, call Larry, and they called me, and we ended up making a deal for Facing Giants and a film that had a theatrical release and really was the sort of launching point for this whole Christian movie thing that's been going on now for 20 years plus.
Doug or John, any follow-up to that?
Yeah, I would say if you're a producer, director, or whatever role you're in, and you just don't know anything about marketing and distribution, and like Larry said, the time to start it is at the very beginning, is that a role that you should add to your team when you're producing your film is what I call is a PMD, which is a producer marketing distribution, or a marketing distribution manager, and just have that person be part of your team that will go out and create a marketing plan, create a distribution plan, help you pinpoint who your audience is. And that way you can go and just, do what you do to produce the film, whatever role you're serving in. It will save you a bunch of time and headaches.
You want? My perspective, it's a little bit different because my market, it's different. I come from Europe. You guys have a big industry of Christian filmmaking here. And most of you guys are trying to be the next Kendrick or the next Irwin or the next Jenkins or the next. But I would go a little bit before of all of this, and I would say to you, what is the call to action that you want to do with your content? It's changing lives, it's saving lives, it's making money, it's becoming famous. What is your purpose of being here, of being in this industry? Because defining that, you're going to define your path. And again, I come from a country that is deeply Catholic, and we are trying to change the perspective where Jesus is nailed on the cross for a Jesus that is alive and changing lives. So my perspective, it's more about impact, okay? When you have like these two tigers here, sharks, not tigers, sharks. So yeah, in a meaning that you guys know how to go to theatrical, know how to do a lot of money from a content. But there should be a perspective where filmmaking is about the main goal of creating impact for Jesus. Of course, that you need to make money to make the next movie, and I'm not against it. Of course, I'm in it, and you need to make money to create a buzz and to create a format where new people want to come to a theatrical release and see the next movie, of course. But after that, what do you do with your content? What is going to happen? It's going to be like on some streaming platforms, it's just one more movie, it's just one more thing, or you want it to go like to difficult places like Africa or India or China or Pakistan or something like that. Is that your goal? Is that on your business plan? Like, this is the first phase, I want to make money out of it. This is the second phase, I want to make impact out of it. This is the third phase, I want to make history out of it. Because you have like I don't know how to say it in English. The film by Bill Curtis' father, The Knife and the
Cross and the Switchblade?
The Switchblade.
The Cross and the Switchblade.
The Cross and the Switchblade. In Portuguese is nothing like that. But movies like The Cross and the Switchblade, they started a movement. And if you don't know it, you should go and watch it because it's like Citizen Kane for Christians. But it's a thing. So if you want to make history out of your project, you need to think from now. And you need to create like 3 phases, 4 phases plan. And each phase, you're going to make something out of it. Money, impact, history, worldview. It depends on what is your project. But the first thing that you need to know, and it's beautiful because we are talking a lot about identity on the keynotes. I don't know if you know this, but every year in the worldview, the Christian worldview, you sense that it's like a purpose, and everybody talks the same, but they are not teach to talk the same. But everybody is talking almost the same. And this year, I noticed we are talking about identity. And what's your identity? What's the identity of your project? And that will build your business plan, that will build your marketing plan, and that probably will build the strategy for your distribution.
So in short, make sure you're thinking about your audience and what your plan is for that project to make money or impact before you start on the project. And part of being good stewards is that we're thinking about these things before we go out and start a project or ask for funding. Because if you're not thinking about those things, you're not setting up your project for success down the road. All right, let's take some questions from you guys. What would you like to know from these 3 marketing and distribution tycoons?
That was the term, not sharks.
My name is Nonso Opmala, and as all of you were speaking, you talked about the whole marketing and distribution process. But as an indie filmmaker, uh, how do you go about this whole marketing and distribution process? Given that you kind of don't really have any experience, what would be your first step, and how do you really go about it? So you've talked about this, Larry, too, where you got to at least know who your audience is. While you're writing, you have to start thinking about the whole distribution and marketing and distribution, but how do you actually start it?
Let me reiterate the question real quick. So if you're an indie filmmaker, what are your first steps to consider in marketing and distribution?
Can I go? I can go.
There's
It, you,
2 points.
okay.
Okay, so who's your audience, and why are they going to go see the movie?
Yeah.
Those are the 2 basic questions I always ask somebody if they're talking about distribution. In cases, for example, where you have a true story, that's what studios look for, a true story or a best-selling book, something with an underlying built-in market already there, so that when the movie comes out, people say, oh, I read the book, I want to go see the movie. If you're writing something that's an original screenplay, you have a much more difficult time unless you have big movie stars in it that will attract an audience. So you have to really think through your strategy, like why would someone get up off their couch, walk away from Netflix and go to a movie theater and spend lots of money for popcorn to sit there and watch a movie when they can do it at home, right? So you need to think through the who's going to come to see it part of it. And that's a difficult question today because so many people are staying home on their couch and watching movies.
I'm going to ask you, is it already done? You are telling, as an indie producer, is it done already, or you just have an idea? Okay, so screenplay, this is the path, of course. But imagine, you have the money and you will produce it by your own means. You decide, you go there and you go do it. And nobody supports you. You went to places like this, pitch it to some distributors. Nobody took it. It happens. Sadly, some of these people know that it happens. You have always a choice, because you can choose to keep it on a draw and say, one day somebody will find it, or you can give it to the world and you can put it on YouTube. And you have a lot of cases where YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, Instagram created big movements, very big movements. So if you trust that your project will create the movement that you believe that it will do, go for it. Because the tycoons, and I'm out of the tycoons, though they are the tycoons, no, just kidding. But the tycoons don't know everything. The proof of that, it's the Sound of Freedom. The Sound of Freedom was in a draw for like 4 years or something. Nobody knew what to do with it. And there was a distribution company that took it, paid for the renting of the cinemas, and made a lot of money. But nobody knew what to do with it until that day. So nobody has the certainty. I think Doug won't say that he knows everything. Larry won't say that he knows everything. I know that I don't know everything. And we and the other distributors aren't the gatekeepers of the success. Because now, with internet, you can do whatever you want. You have a lot of people that started in Spotify, and now they are big stars. So it depends. Because if it's very artistic, it's very difficult to digest for the big companies. Sometimes we don't understand the project. We don't know your audience. Public is a different thing. We don't know your audience. So there's no magical key. There's no magical formula. There's a lot of trying, missing, error, correcting, trying, missing, error, correcting, until you find your path. And I'm really surprised, because I'm being in the States for like 21 days or something for this trip. And I'm seeing a new generation of greatness, because there's a lot of people doing different things, different approaches. Yesterday I listened to a guy that I love from here, from Christian Worldview, and he was telling me that his project is like a series, and he will do like a tour for medieval fairs to show it to the people. I never would thought of something like that. And it's great, it's a great idea, because a series passes on those times, that kind of people are on those fairs, why don't show it there? It's a great idea. So I would think about it, I wouldn't, but he did. And I believe that it would be a success when he will do it. So there's no solution. You cannot trust the distributor as like the last resort. You need to try to create your path.
Yeah, I'll add to, like, so when you're thinking about your audiences, you know, you're going to probably have a bucket of like maybe 2 or 3 audience verticals. And with those audience verticals are going to be niche audiences. And when you think about your niche audience, you want to figure out who your core audience is in each of those niches. And then from there, you'll have secondary and then tertiary audiences. And those are the audiences that you want to gear your script to, your story to, is those the core audience in your niches, and from there it was growing. So like from what he was saying, based on the guy he was talking to, you know, he identified a niche audience as people who go to these fairs, and so he's, you know, being very targeted, and he's going to go from there. Well, then it's going to kind of expand from there. So that's just something to think about, like as you know, as Larry was saying, especially when you're in the script stage.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. You guys have said, hey, we want to be thinking about this from the very beginning, right? Who our audience is, why they're going to go watch this movie. So when would be the right time to have a conversation with one of y'all? Let's say I'm working on an indie project, and let's say I have done a good job of thinking about who my audience is, why these people would come watch my movie. When do I start having a conversation with one of y'all about the distribution and marketing side of it? You said, you know, you can bring on a producer that's in those roles. Is that y'all, or would you say have a conversation with you later?
I would say it's at the script stage. If you have a script, that's when you start talking about this, because you have an opportunity at that point to make changes if you're missing the target. Or you might have additional targets that you didn't even consider that you could market the screenplay that ultimately becomes a movie to that audience that you hadn't even thought about. So I'd say as early as possible. When people have submitted scripts to me, the first question I always ask them is, who's your audience? So that's the starting point. If you don't know who your audience is, if you can't identify that audience with sufficient precision to be able to come up with marketing plans and opportunities to bring that knowledge of the script and the film itself to the audience, it's going to be a losing proposition. It'll be a big struggle. But if you can think in terms of producing an original screenplay that you're going to do something unique and different, but it's going to be able to touch a chord with an audience that wants to see a certain kind of picture, then you're ahead of the game. If you're just doing something that's something you like, which many writers do, I've seen many scripts that, oh, well, it's well written, but it's not saying anything, or it's not going anywhere. There's no indication who the audience would be for this. And the other point I want to make on that is, I've had so many people say when I ask them, who's the audience? They say it's a 4-quadrant movie. And it's like, oh.
Larry, leave the room.
Yeah, then it's like, oh, that's the groaner, because everybody thinks they have a 4-quadrant movie. If you're familiar with the term, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're not, it means that it's for all audience segments. Okay, well, there's no movie that is going to do that except maybe some of the big blockbuster Marvel things or something. But even then, I mean, there's a whole segment of the audience that's not going to go see those too. So as you sit down before you even start writing a screenplay, the recommendation I have is look and see, first of all, are there other stories like it out there, and were they successful? And which one does yours line up with the best? And what kind of marketing did they do? And how can you pitch this to a potential studio or investor and point out a real comparable film or films that you think this will play with? Because again, I think there's a lot of misnomers about pitch decks and pitching in general that are sort of misleading. I've seen many, many pitch decks, and they're all worthless, pretty much. And the reason,
Especially the ones with AI.
yeah, oh yeah,
That sounds always the same. It's
Yeah.
always the same thing.
and one of the reasons they're worthless is that people don't understand that if you put pictures of real actors, Hollywood actors, in as the characters in your pitch deck and make lots of weird comparisons that really aren't going to be applicable, because you'll put in all the most successful, high-grossing movies. It's going to be totally blown away by anyone who looks at it. They're going to say this is ridiculous. And so I'm not a big fan of pitch decks, and a lot of execs I've talked to are similarly not particularly enamored of pitch decks. What they would rather do is see a good screenplay, read a good screenplay, and let their imagination think about who's going to be the star. It's going to be someone like so-and-so or so-and-so. So there's a lot of little cottage industries that have grown up in the film business in the last 20 or 25 years, including the pitch deck makers. And I think that it throws the focus off of would-be writers and directors to think they have to do a pitch deck, and the pitch decks all look alike now. And you have to do something unique in a screenplay. If I call an executive that I know and say, what you're thinking about pitch decks, the response I've had is, I want to read the screenplay. I don't care about the pitch deck. So keep that in mind, because again, there's been a whole cottage industry of pitch deck makers and AI stuff, and when you show people actors and they think the actors are going to be in the movie, but it's really somebody who's like that actor, but you don't say it's like that, we want someone like this person. Again, it's going to be very unprofessional looking, and it can kill your project before they even read the script. So my personal advice is write a great script and get it read, and don't worry about the pitch deck so much.
Actually, I want to add just a little thing. We live in a time where you can do something with your phone. Most of you have phones with 4K capabilities. So if you have like the possibility of create something like a proof of concept, because in this room, who has watched at least one episode of The Chosen? Okay, everybody. Who watched The Shepherds, which is the proposal of the Chosen? If there wasn't The Shepherds, there wouldn't be the Chosen. So he did it with a very small, very smaller budget, a proof of concept. And when you go to the distributors or to the producers or to the studios, and you have a proof of concept, and people watch and say, okay, this makes sense. What's the next step? Because when the guy on this side makes a question, you have your foot on the door. And a question is the best thing, because the question starts the conversation, that the conversation starts to create solutions. Because the worst thing that could happen is, yeah, thank you so much. Give me your cars. And he leaves. Because that's not a start of a conversation. A conversation is question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And one of the secrets for me for engaging with someone that's pitching me something is, does it make sense for me? Because, and I can tell you, I won't say the names, but thanks to Paul, which is in the room, I've been in several pitch-a-thons at ICVM. And ICVM has a beautiful concept, which is the pitch-a-thon, where everybody can go and speak to the distributors. People like me, like Doug, like Angel, like Clyde, like Larry, like the people that will distribute and support your work. And I think it was in Washington. At the end, some of the distributors went for a dinner. We were happy with all of the things that happened, and we went to a dinner. And next to me was one of the big tycoons. I won't say names, but it's probably the one that all of you would like to have like 1 minute with him. And we were asking each other, what did you felt? What kind of projects did you find? And he asked me, and I felt very honored, because it's a big guy in the industry, and he asking me. And I said, look, for me it was strange, because I usually just want final product. I don't think about scripts because I'm far away to control the production. So for me, it's very strange to send money to the United States and not control part of the production. So it would be something very special. But if I would live in America, if I would have the money to invest, most of the people that show me stuff was Nazis, war, submarines, Mars, epical movies in the 1800s, 1700s, all of the things that I would run away from because they are very expensive, very difficult to film, very difficult to explain. And why? The main question for me, and he laughed and he said, imagine what they showed me. Because you guys think that he has the money to do it. So it was even crazier. So when you are writing, and thank God we have a writer with us, when you are writing, I would say try to keep it real. There's a technique everybody knows, KISS, keep it simple. You know the rest. I won't be offensive on holy ground, but keep it simple. Because if you go, and if it's your first project, you have nothing to show, you don't have nothing to say for yourself, why your first movie needs to be in Mars? Or why does your first movie needs to be in the 1800s? Or why does your first movie needs to have like a submarine? Why? But I know why, because of Netflix, because you want to be in the next Marvel, you want to be in the next something. I understand, but make something good, and then you'll find the solution to create something even better, even better, even better. It may be like for the 4th or 5th movie, you can have a submarine, a small one. But
I would just springboard off of that one other point, and that is do a little bit of research about budgeting movies, because you want to be able to write a script that's a low budget script, if possible. You don't want to start off by writing an epic or a Marvel type movie. You want to start out with something that can be shot without a lot of extraordinary locations or extraordinary wardrobe or extraordinary special effects or stunts, things that would be very expensive. So if you're going to do a drama, for example, then look at the ways you can cut your costs by doing it as a modern day drama instead of a 1930s drama, where you'd have to have all costumes made and 1930s cars rented and found to be rented and all that. If you start thinking about budget right at the beginning of your writing of a screenplay, then it's going to be a smart thing to do, because you're not going to write this, incredibly complex story with all kinds of special effects and things that are not going to be fundable by private investors generally. On the other hand, if you learn about budgeting and the realistic costs of things, you can write your movie and take that into account, and when someone at a studio is reviewing the screenplay, they're going to say, wow, we can make this for a few $1 million, and today's costs are such that the marketing expense can be a third of the cost of the movie. So if you get that movie out there, you've got to recover not only the budget of the movie, but the marketing expenses. So you want to have a good marketing hook where somebody looking at an ad for the movie will go, hey, that's clever, I want to go see that, or that sounds really great. But you don't want to make it a $100 million screenplay that, you'd have to have a major studio fund, and they may, if they don't like it, they're not going to fund it anyway. But think budget, and today's market is such that if you can bring in a really good story with a really low budget, then you have a greater chance of success than trying to write some sort of blockbuster or period piece that would be very expensive.
Just to follow up on that, if you guys think about, let's say the Irwins and their story, right? Like early on, they produce October Baby, which is a modern day film with minimal cast, and no animals and no kids. And now they're doing House of David for $100 million a season on Prime. But those three rules, like we talk about this all the time, in your first movies, no kids, no animals, and no period pieces, because they all cost money. So if you're going to talk to a guy like this and you're going to say, hey, I want to have a conversation with you about distribution, I have this great sci-fi concept, they're going to look at you sideways and say, no. Like, what's your background? Are you John Irwin? You're not? Okay, well then we're not talking about House of David, where we want entire companies on horses and we're going to build fortified cities. Like, it's not going to happen, right? So I would just encourage you to really think about that. Keep it simple in the beginning. Yes? Ooh, we'll take, Sheila, we'll take your first one, and then we'll come back.
Okay, the first one is, can you speak to marketing a series? The second one is, what pitfalls to avoid? Is there pros and cons in that? Third one, would you recommend doing a feature
Hold on.
of the series?
Let me pause you.
I'll go back.
We'll do the first one.
And then your shelf life expectation. So, marketing for a series.
Can you re-ask the first question?
Yeah, the marketing for a series. What would you, how would you go about that? What would you expect? Pros and cons, tips to doing that? Can you speak to any of that?
Okay, let me tweak that a little bit. So what's the difference between marketing a standalone film versus marketing a series?
Yeah, so marketing a series is it's gonna be over a period of time. So depending on how long the series is, okay, say you're in first season, so it's like, okay, you want to do, a big push for at least the, pilot episode. So that could be PR, you're getting your actors out there, talking about the show. So that's going to be your earned media where people are going to, start learning about it. Then you could do ads, digital ads. It depends on your budget. You could do in ads, digital could be like, Facebook, Google. You could do CTV ads, which are like pre-roll ads on like YouTube and other platforms. So there's all these different tactics that you could do. But again, your marketing plan for a series has to be, definitely targeted to who your particular audience is. So, and then what you're going to do is then you're going to have, if you have a pilot, and then they're going to start showing, the episodes. People want to know, like, what day and time am I going to be able to, watch these episodes. And it's all about keeping your audience engaged in your series. So you want to use your social media, have some type of content that you're putting out regularly, that maybe talks about the characters, in the series. Maybe it talks about some behind the scenes stuff, clips that you could put out on social media as well. So those type of things definitely will help. So that's particular, and that's a very different marketing strategy than it would be for a theatrical release. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do some interstitial questions for you. Sorry, I think you had your hand raised before there.
All right, thank you so much. So, I haven't worked with the Kendricks for such a long time. And also, I would want, other distributors, you could throw light into this. I want to understand, in this space where the numbers majorly seem to be what defines success for a film, especially theatrical, how do you balance? I mean, yesterday I heard Mr. Steven, he said a lot about, how they make their films. They pray to God, and God gives them a story. When the market, in quote, doesn't understand the story God's given you, and the market tells you the story is not going to succeed in the market, how are you able, even as a distributor, how would you advise when you receive a story? I know we need to do excellence and all of that, but how do we balance receiving a story that you're convinced God says to make with the demand of a market whose measure of success is box office numbers? How do you handle that and still be a steward who is responsible with what God has said to do and the resources you have to make that? How do you balance that?
Let me reiterate the question real quick. So, how do you balance between what the industry's expectations are for what would be considered a successful film, and then a different set of expectations if you're doing a film that doesn't line up with industry expectations?
Versus secular.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, basically, with Sony, for example, we have free reign with respect to the content. If for some reason Sony did not like the content or had a problem with it, then we would address that. But basically, Sony has let us do pretty much what we want, and we started out contractually setting it up so that we had control over the content and the faith content particularly. We didn't want that to be messed with by the studio, and they've respected that. But in terms of Lifemark was a different story, yeah, which I can.
It could be a good exception to.
Yeah, because with Lifemark's the only film that was not a Sony picture, okay? And Lifemark came at a time when we thought it would be a viable marketing situation because we're talking about adoption, not abortion. And what happened there, well, because I don't know if you know the story of Lifemark. Basically, there was a young woman in high school who was about to have an abortion and literally got off the table and ran away and had the baby, put him up for adoption. When he grew up, he was about 18, 19 years old. He went looking for his birth mother. And our view was that this is a story about adoption, not a story about abortion. And so we wanted to avoid any political problems with it and so forth. And yet it spoke to,
Because the time of release was the time where the Supreme Court.
Yeah, the timing was really bad.
Yeah. I love the story because the story it's great because they start filming it when it wasn't a subject. It was nobody was talking about it. It was just a film about adoption.
Right.
But because of the law was changing or changed, it was premiered on the thunderstorm.
Yes, what happened was that our deal with Sony is such that they will do ongoing films that we want to do, but if they decide they don't want to do one, then we can take it and do it ourselves, produce it elsewhere. And because of the Dobbs decision coming out when it did, there was a lot of political heat all over the country, as you may recall, and the studio, Sony wanted to pass. They were afraid that they would get all kinds of demonstrations on the studio lot and around the studio, and other studios, it was the same thing. Nobody wanted to touch it. All the studios passed on it. So we decided at that point to raise our own capital to produce the movie. And the Dobbs decision came down, and it was really problematic as far as the movie went, among other reasons, perhaps. But the deal we had with Sony is, we can do a picture. If they decide they don't want to do a picture, we can take it elsewhere, self-fund or whatever. And we raised capital for that. We had investors. And we went ahead with the movie, and we thought, since adoption is ubiquitous, it's not just a, quote, Christian movie, and it's certainly not a movie about abortion directly, like October Baby was more in that vein. So the political climate was such at the time that it didn't work very well, and the studios were afraid of it. And so they didn't want to take a risk that they'd get picketed or have some blowback on putting out a film that dealt with a topic that started out with an abortion potential, but it wasn't really about that. It was, so you have to look at then Right to Life. What does that mean? Does that only mean abortion or anti-abortion movies or what? But we tried to frame it in a way that was going to reach many, many people. And there are non-Christians out there looking to adopt, not just Christians. And so we thought, well, we have a pretty big audience. And it obviously, it came at a really bad time with the pandemic. As you guys probably know, for a few years there, we were getting beat up at the box office. Everyone was. We were lucky we had films that were not $100 million budget films, because several of those, it was funny, I was watching the opening weekend stats on films during that period, and it was, you'd have a $200 million movie that's making 20 or 30 grand opening weekend, and it's like, oh boy, I'm glad we're not in that studio. But anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Actually, there's a silver lining, because Sony picked it up after. It was such a success that now it's with Sony also.
No.
Oh, I thought it was.
No, not LifeMark is not.
Oh, I thought it was.
No,
Sorry.
it's still. So what we had to do in that case, we self-financed it, had investors involved, and then we ended up with 6 different distributors rather than one studio that covered the entire planet, and that was an adventure in itself. I can tell you stories about that.
No, it sounds sad.
So the point is, if there's a pandemic going on and there's a Supreme Court case that comes down that's going to be a problem, then hold off doing your movie. But then, the Forge has done incredibly well. It was number 5 worldwide on Netflix, which, if you think about how many Netflix films there are, that's an astounding accomplishment. So we're glad to be back, so to speak. But that's one thing to consider if you're writing a screenplay. Pick a topic that's going to have some longevity to it, because it may take you, a few years to write and get that all polished up and everything, and it may take another few years to get the studio interested or independent investors interested and so forth. It's a long process typically. And there's, I think, was it The Queen's Gambit that was the series that was written about 20 years before it was made? Some really long time. So
it's The Queen.
I'm sorry.
It happens.
That happens. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. But
wanted to be clear, is that considered, because I believe every film the Kendrick brothers make, they've gone through the presence, into the presence of the Lord to get a goal. That industry setback, did it come as a failure to that project, or is it still considered that they've done what God asked them to do and it is a success? Because to cap this up, I want to know, was that still success, or because it didn't make the box office, that's the reason it is not a success?
Here, I think I can actually address that for you. So if you talk to a lot of filmmakers here, there are filmmakers who are intentionally pursuing commercial success. There are filmmakers who are pursuing some other kind of success, and there are filmmakers who are pursuing both of those things. So the Kendrick brothers films are what we would call multi-bottom line. And what I mean by that is we want them to financially make money, let's say, but they also want them to have a spiritual impact. You have filmmakers here who are essentially just missional filmmakers. And the guys that we interviewed yesterday who did Lynn Bought the Farm, they're not trying to make money on those movies, they're giving them away for free. So what I'd say the answer to your question would be, what's the metric of success for the film that you're producing? If the goal is, I need this to be financially successful, then that is at least one metric of success, as opposed to, this is a missional film. Well, they could look at LifeMark and if they say, hey, this is a double bottom line for us, and if on the spiritual side of the bottom line, let's say, or the issue-based side, they considered that to be successful, it could still be considered a success. I don't think Sony would look at that project and say that that was a success by their metric. So that'd be the answer is, what's your metric of success for the project?
And I believe that for someone like the Kendricks, if they saved one life, it was a success. Because knowing them as we know, for them, the gospel, the worldview, their point of view, and if you watched it this morning, he was telling something like that if the film is a failure, it's a failure because God wants him to be, because they will take it to God before everything else. So there's no metric of success, I would say, because you can see like the guy from Minecraft, they made millions of dollars selling the game for Microsoft, and now he's like a puppet. He suffers of not still creating the thing that he created. So money is not the solution for all of the problems, like I believe that most of us knows. And yeah, it's different. And picking up on what Greg just told, there's a hybrid solution for success. I can give you an example because it's a content that I just sign off. It's called He Calls Me Daughter. Anybody heard about it? So He Calls Me Daughter. It's a film by Rick Altizer. I need to check the names because, you know. And Rick done a beautiful documentary first with the Kendricks that it's He Calls Me Father? No, it's something, Show Me the Father. And now this is a rerun with the point of view of women that were mistreated by their parents. I can explain you why I'm explaining this. He Calls Me Daughter is going to premiere here in the United States on theatrical, I think next week. So you should go and support it. But they thought it in a way that they know that the American market can pay for it, and they will try to break even from the theatrical release. After the theatrical release, for everywhere in the world that channels, Christian channels like mine, want to show it to their audience, they'll give it away. So it's a multi-purpose, is what just Greg said. They have the bills to pay. Of course they have the bills to pay. And if they will make the money, perfect. But it's not just all about money. It's not just about the money. It's about the impact. If you can change one life, we all know the story of the man that sold pearls. And he sold all of the pearls to buy one, which we know it's a parable for his salvation, for his connection with Jesus. So wouldn't you change all of the cameras, all of the gear, all of the computers, all of the cars for one soul in heaven? You probably would. So it's success, it's a different thing to measure, I would say.
Let me spring off that for a moment. I've been involved in a ministry called Illustra Media for over 25 years now. And what we do is we produce documentaries and have focused, there's been faith-oriented documentaries, but recently we've done the Case for Christ series, Case for Christ, Case for Faith, Case for Creator, and that got distributed by Lionsgate through a Christian distribution company, and it ended up actually making money, which surprised everybody. And again, that was an interesting situation because the board of Illustra Media, which I've been a part of for over 25 years now, we were wanting Lionsgate to distribute it, and some of the board members were afraid, why are we wanting Lionsgate to distribute it? They make all those horror movies and thrillers and things that are contrary to our beliefs and so forth. And we say, do you ever go to a supermarket and buy products and know who those companies are doing business with who are not Christians? So we won the battle to let Lionsgate distribute it, and it did really well. They co-funded the production of the three films, The Case for Christ, Case for Faith, and Case for Creator. And TBN was involved with it. They wanted the TV rights on it. And it ended up being profitable. And we were really surprised how it turned out, but we just kept at it. And it was the right time and the right place and the right distribution. But that's not something you can always guarantee. That's right. And so with the Kendrick movies, you know, we saw The Forge at number 5 worldwide, which meant there's a lot of eyeballs out there that saw that movie. So whatever the financial return is, we know we're going to get some spiritual return off of that movie from all of the millions of people who have seen it. And that's our goal is not dollar focused, it's kingdom focused. So when you're writing a film, if you can write a film that's kingdom focused, but it also is commercially viable, then you're in a win-win situation. And that's our ultimate goal. We want to keep making movies, and the budgets continue to climb because the costs continue to climb. But if you can you can't ignore the financial side of things if you want to continue operating and producing movies. Now, with Illustra Media, this documentary production company that's a nonprofit, one thing we did is we went to China and sold DVDs of all these intelligent design, faith-based films. In China, we sold them for 1 penny per disc because we wanted to get those out there. Exactly. We wanted to reach as many unsaved people in China as we could possibly reach. And there was a distributor there who was willing to do it. And so that's sort of the flip side of the coin, where it's not the amount of money that is as important as the spiritual impact that those kinds of films can have. So you need to decide what you want. Are you in it to be able to make money commercially and continue making films commercially? But if you're a nonprofit, you have to think like a business person as well, because if you want to continue to make movies, you've got to raise the funds. So God bless you if you can make a movie and it makes a bunch of money and you're able to make more movies. But to make a movie as a nonprofit where you're operating on donations, it's a fragile situation, and it may not lead the same direction as if you're focused in a business way on your distribution and returns.
I just want to make an appointment because it's a thing that it's deep in my heart. Because when most of you guys do a distribution deal, you give it exclusive rights to a distributor, and you need to check if impact is in your hearts. You need to check if that distributor thinks worldwide. Because most of the big distribution companies here in the United States, they don't think worldwide. They think America, Brazil, Mexico, Canada. And everywhere else, it's like a blur in their vision. So if your idea is to cause impact in complicated nations like Pakistan, like nations in Africa, like the south of Europe, like China, you need to take care of those rights, okay? And think, I want to guarantee the rights on the non-profitable countries, or at least have control of those things. I'm going to explain you why. Several of you guys, not here, but in ICVM, come to me and say, I really want to help in Angola, in Mozambique, take it to Portugal, take it to Spain, take it to Italy. And I say, of course, it makes sense, it's a great content. And then we go and talk to a guy that controls the distribution. And he says, oh, they want to give it to you. Of course, you can have it. You just need to pay for the contract. And the contract sometimes is 10K, 20K, 50K for one piece of paper, because the distributor controls the narrative, and they want to gain something out of it. And it makes sense. But if you are thinking about impact, and if you're thinking, okay, I want to make money here, but there I want to save lives, here it's about money, here is about seeds of salvation, you need to take care of those contracts. So be aware, and I'm not asking you for giving me anything. I really am. I'm not. If you want, you can. But it's not about the free stuff. It's about the idea that you control your process. Because sometimes it happens. And it happened a few months ago with a series. And I got to reach with a distribution company. And the guy in the distribution company was a Christian. And he told me, João, I will give you, instead of those 10 hours that they already gave it to you, I'll give you 100 hours. But you need to give me 20K for the contract. So you're going to pay 20K for the contract, but I'll give you everything that I have for free. I'll give it to you because it cost me the same to do a contract for a series or for 200 series, because the problem is the contract. And I don't have anything against lawyers, because lawyers are a thing of God. Some people don't believe that. But lawyers are a thing of God, because God is all about rules. You know, God is an organized being. So you need to have protection. You need to have like the stuff well done, but remember to protect your rights. Okay?
And we just have a few minutes left, so I want to take your question right here in the front.
At the beginning, you was talking about a person should have their script read or manuscript read first. How does one get the script to you or someone like you to read?
So so ICVM has a pitch-a-thon. So you could get in front of 20 distributors or more and pitch your script to them. Most distributors prefer, finished films, but there is that opportunity, and that's the film market side. But at ICVM, you have an opportunity to pitch, a script to those who are looking for it. ICVM, so International Christian Visual Media. And if you want to learn more about ICVM, so Paul Sermons is sitting back there. He's waving his hand. So just talk to Paul, and he can tell you all about it. Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, we have time for one more quick question. Over here.
Thank you. My question kind of goes back to pitch decks and proof of concepts. I appreciate your position on pitch decks and that you may not want to use, big name actors. Does that same thing kind of go along with proof of concept, that do you want to use actors that you want to have in the film, or does it not matter? You're just trying to get the idea across. The other thing is that pitch decks obviously are very cheap to make. Proof of concept, not so much, right? So just your opinion on that. Thanks.
You have?
Yeah, I can tell you. It's not about the pitch deck. It's not about the proof of concept. It's about creating a connection. It's all about creating a connection. I'm going to tell you, a few years ago, in I think NRB, maybe in NRB, there was a production company that brought 25 tablets, Amazon Fire tablets. And they went to all of the 25 distributors and gave us a tablet with their content in it. And I always remember them. I never made business out of it. It wasn't for me. But I always remember that they stand a point, because every one of us kept their tablets, watched their content, because they put like the series and the movies on their tablet. You want to make a presence. And sometimes it's a joke. People sit and make a joke. Sometimes it's like there was a time, I think Paul remembers, two girls, I hope they are not here. Two girls appeared completely dressed in pink. And they were across the room, and everybody noticed the pink girls, because it was about the pink. Or it could be something. You don't need, because if the story is good, and all of us know that if the story is good, it will stick. Because what makes you watch something on Netflix or on Prime or on other streaming platforms? It's the story. It's not the visual effects. Sorry, Andrew. It's not the filming. It's not the camera that they use. It's not the sound system that they use. It's the story. And you watch that on YouTube. You watch that on everywhere. The story is what gets you. I think we are Christians because Jesus is a great storyteller. The story is great, but he's a great storyteller. So, yeah, of course, the pitch deck is the standard, and maybe most of the older companies want the pitch deck to put like in the folder, to put on the brief, on the case, and to have it like there, everything together like it should be. But at the point that we are with Angel Studios that don't receive paper out of you. You can go to Jared, and Jared won't receive anything. You will leave it at the table, because you need to go via the guild. So there are completely different systems to do things. So there's not a path, there's not a formula. There's a beautiful story, a beautiful way to tell that story, and sell it the best way that you can.
Just again, the pitch deck thing. I've talked to some studio execs about that and what their preference is. And a couple of people I greatly respect said, I don't want a pitch deck. I just want to read the screenplay, because that's what really matters. And that's sort of my opinion, having looked at so many pitch decks and tried to navigate that and figure out, okay, what's the best way to pitch now? Is it with a pitch deck, or is it? There's a whole cottage industry that has grown up about making pitch decks, and it's profitable for them, but it's not profitable necessarily for the writers who are using, or producers who are making the pitch decks. So if you can create a synopsis, that's going to be sufficient, because they're going to look at the synopsis and say, do I want to read the script or not? If it's a compelling synopsis, they're not going to care about a lot of photographs or hyperbole or terrible comps that people, it's amazing how many people in the Christian space in particular use the same exact comps. You know, my picture is like one of these, and they have 10 of the top Christian films. It's not going to matter. What matters is the screenplay. So that's why some of these execs I've talked to who actually will review scripts say, we don't care about the pitch deck. It's very colorful and nice and all that, but what really is going to matter and what's going to save us the most time is if we have a synopsis and can tell, do we want to do a story like this? And if they're interested or intrigued by the synopsis, they'll read the script. And if they like the script, then you can make a deal. If they don't like the script, so be it.
I just want to remark, because I know that we don't have the time. So my remark is very simple. Always listen to the executive producer, and always make God your executive producer. If you listen to him, everything that we are saying, and he says, go completely opposite, do it. Because it's what's going to work.
Let me add to that in terms of practical experience. For a period of time, I worked as a story analyst in a studio story department, which meant I read 6 scripts and usually a novel per week and did a synopsis for the senior production executive. And these were submitted by agency scripts. They weren't unsolicited, they were solicited. And yet I saw maybe 1% to 2% that were worth a second read and worth passing on to the production executives. And those are agent representative writers. So you can imagine how many thousands of screenplays are registered with the Writers Guild.
Can you imagine? We have Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. So just keep that in mind, that there's a whole system in place, at least in the studio level, but even with independent producers, they have readers and so forth. And a very, very small percentage get through the grid to even be considered twice. So,
Okay, so in summary, don't just write what you want. Think about your audience, who's going to watch your movie and why, and write better stories. That's what I heard. And then that's how you get distributed and marketed. So, hey, give these guys a hand for their time, please. And if you have follow-up questions, you can ask them after this.
Much. Thank you guys so much, truthfully.